Hey, this is Gable Price, and you are listening to the Rumors Are True podcast.
Welcome, this is Jeremy Allen Gould, and I'm coming to you today to confirm between God and of man that the rumors you have all heard are true. I started this podcast to have a platform for the bands and artists that I've worked with in the past, as well as new musicians and artists that influenced myself and many others. The Rumors Are True podcast is an opportunity for the artists to tell their story their way. I'm still in the business of confirming rumors. I still love a good conversation, and I still freaking love music. So thanks again for joining me on this journey, and I hope you like what you hear. With that said, the rumors are definitely true.
What if time just stood still, giving a space for something real? And what if it lasted through the night? Would we sleep or never close our eyes? What if the clocks held their breath, and in the stillness we were left to savor every whispered word, the softest sound that we have ever heard? All we
Hey, thank you for tuning in to this latest episode of the Rumors Are True podcast. My name is Jeremy, and today I welcome Scott Davis and Jeremy Edwardson from the band The Myriad. Awesome conversation with these two amazingly talented individuals. It's so cool to hear their perspective on the band and the future of the band as well. So, hope you enjoyed this latest episode with Scott Davis and Jeremy Edwardson.
If you thought of me, would you say so? If you thought of me, and would it crush you if you saw me bleed?
Scott and Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Guys, I really appreciate it.
What's up, Jeremy?
What's up? What's new, guys? Tell me what's going on in your world.
Right now, I mean, we are just writing. I mean, I feel like every day I go into the studio and I start making music, and the hard part right now for me is just like what I want to say, and that's I think probably always the challenge for a songwriter. And there's a lot to say, but it's like what exactly do I want to say, and how do I frame that in this song? And so that's what we've been doing, and we've been aiming to put out like a song every like month or two, but it's and the bar's pretty high. We've been doing this for a while, so we want to make sure that when we put stuff out, there's a lot of creating and throwing away, and then creating and throwing away, and then we land on something. It's like, ooh,
yeah,
cool. Let's go this way for a little bit,
Yeah, awesome. Scott, tell me what's up with you. I know you were talking overall of the band, but just individually, what you got going on.
Yeah, I mean, work and family. Besides doing the stuff with the Myriad, I also drum for a worship artist named Kim Walker-Smith.
Oh, yeah. She was just down here, I think.
Yeah, so actually I took some time off to be home with my family to deal with some family stuff.
Oh, cool.
Normally I travel with her a ton, and basically been with her since about 2015. I would say more off and on, and then more consistently since about 2020, traveling with her. And then besides that, like my day job, day to day, I do design. So I work for like a big tech company doing design for them. And then, back here, actually behind me is a little studio space where I track drums for different people. Jeremy included, one of those people.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
Awesome. And then just been doing the Myriad stuff, like Jeremy said, writing songs. And I've actually been involved in the writing process this time around than I was in the past. So that's been a really fun challenge. I'm asking Jeremy lots of questions and getting a lot of feedback, and so far only Insomniatic was actually the first song I wrote the original music for.
That's awesome.
It sounded way different. It sounded like kind of Americana. I was listening to a lot of Lord Huron, and so it came out when I wrote that song originally, but Jeremy found something really good with it. But
that's awesome.
Use it. So yeah.
Very cool. Jeremy, I know you talked about the band, but individually, I know we kind of talked off record, but tell me what's going on in your world.
Yeah, I've been producing music and just started getting into film actually, but I've been producing music for about 25 years now, and I've been doing that ever since. When I wasn't on the road with the Myriad, I always had several bands lined up when I got home. And when the band kind of took a pause, I loaded up with production work. And so that's my day is usually, if I'm not writing for the Myriad, which is something new now because I haven't done that for a while, but when I'm not writing for the Myriad, I'm mixing and producing and mastering and all the stuff. I've got a studio in Reading called the Sound House, which I built in 2009. And, yeah, that's my full-time thing. I've got 2 kids, married. My kids are 13 and 15. They're going bananas in about every sport you can imagine. So, when I'm not at the studio, I'm running around watching games all over
dad life. That's awesome, man. Yeah, you mentioned the Sound House, and I love the studio. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And I think you and I first met there, I want to say it was 2009, maybe. Probably. Yeah. I came out with Jonathan and Jared on tour, and we stayed out there for 3 weeks. And it's so funny because I always was fascinated wanting to go to a studio because I never was a musician. Mm-hmm. And so I remember, waking up late and then walking and going to the studio, and I was like, in my mind, this is going to be incredible. And I was bored out of my freaking mind because I'm not a musician. So I'm like, what in the world? But it was so cool to see you guys work, but it's never been a thing for me. And I just, in my mind, thought, oh, this is going to be incredible, which again, it was, but it was for not a musician. It's I don't get, it's not, I can't be there for hours, but I respect it. I think it's amazing what you do there, but it was just so cool to meet you and your family at that time, and go to the Squire room and all that stuff. It was really, really cool.
Oh yeah, those were definitely the days. I remember when we first met, Jonathan and Jared, they were playing in a band called Bernard. In Jacksonville, Florida, and they would rent out this theater called Murray Hill Theater, and they would open up for bands that came through, and they usually like brought in bands that they really liked. So they were fans of the Myriad. They opened up for us, and we were completely blown away. We actually stepped out of the theater and called our label head at the time, Tim Tabor, Floodgate, and we said, "You guys got to sign these guys." So Tim actually flew out like a week later.
That's great.
And signed Bernard, and then we kind of became tour mates with those guys, and eventually Bernard turned into Sun Bears. Jonathan actually in 2008, he actually moved to Redding. He needed a break from Florida and moved to Redding for 6 months, lived with my wife and I, and it was really fun after 6 months it started getting weird. You know, having a dude living with us. And at one point, we had a big party over, and Jonathan was really into hookah at that point. So he loaded the hookah up, and was burning, and none of us knew he was working on a hookah in our kitchen. We were just out there with the party guests. We had probably 50 people over, and Jonathan's like heating up a hookah over our oven.
I think I remember this story now.
Our stove, and so he's over the stove, he's heating up the hookah. He comes running into me and says, "Jeremy, I need you for a minute." And I said, "What's going on? You look worried." And he said, a hookah coal just exploded all over your kitchen. And I'm like, "Well, what are you doing about it?" He's like, "I'm getting you." I run in, and we've got linoleum flooring.
Oh my God.
Little tiny hookah coals are literally burning every single spot of, all around the entire kitchen. All these like burning rubber linoleum floors are just kind of going up. So I grabbed a towel and I just kind of swept the whole floor. And then I went and told my wife, "Hey, Jonathan almost burned down our kitchen. It's a mess. There's fire. There was like fire everywhere." And Jonathan lived with us for about another week after that. But on the final day, he handed us the DVD "You, Me, and Dupree," which was perfect because it's like a movie basically that fit our life with Jonathan.
Oh my God. I love that. That's incredible. I lived with him too for a little bit, for like a month, and then he was like, "All right, it's time to go."
I love
that. That's awesome. That's so cool. Awesome.
He's probably played on 100 albums I've produced.
Dude, he's so good. He's so talented.
Yeah, there was a time where he was playing on guitar on at least 5 albums I was doing at any given month, and so it was fun times.
That's awesome. I love hearing that, man. Those are good times. I definitely look on those fondly, and that we wound up, getting to see each other at the John Mark Live at the Night, which was really cool, and that turned out amazing, and that was just really cool opportunity to be a part of that, and just to see you kind of do your thing, it was really cool. It's awesome.
Oh yeah, that record, John Mark McMillan Live at the Night, that was definitely one of the most beautiful displays of art in the form of a live concert film that I've been a part of. So
beautiful.
I'll never forget that night. That was amazing.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, let's talk about growing up for you guys. Scott, let's go with you first. Maybe some influences, some bands, records, maybe even some concerts that kind of, pushed you in the direction that you went in musically.
W's, Real Big Fish.
Yeah.
We actually met when he was in a ska band.
Oh my God.
When we were in high school, I was in a band called Whistletoe, and we had horn players, but we were a little bit more rock and roll, like Real Big Fish with horns. And then Scott was like in the ska band.
I was in a legit ska band.
The Buckaroo Bandits, and they were full ska, but we were like friends, but also, when you're 17, we're also kind of rivals.
Yeah, we were rivals.
It was like 2 football teams from different high schools, even though we're playing shows together. But
that's
I
amazing.
just stole Scott's thunder, but go for it. That's how we met.
Well, growing up, I was really into a lot of punk rock, stuff like Nirvana. I was a real big Nirvana fan.
Yeah.
Growing up. And I originally started actually on guitar. My brother is a guitar player. He's really good. And I used to see him play guitar. Come from a musical family. Like my dad was a trumpet player. My uncle, really good musician as well. And so kind of was around music a lot and decided to pick up the guitar and liked it. But every time I was over at like friends' houses and stuff, hanging out, and there'd be a drum set there, I'd get on the drums and I just like was immediately like in love with the drums.
Yeah.
And so I ended up kind of taking it more serious. And I'd say near the end of my legendary ska band that Jeremy mentioned, I was really leaning into drums more, and then just decided, okay, I actually really want to play drums, and started studying with a couple different teachers. And then,
Well,
yeah,
I'll jump in because I feel like I need to tell how you started with the Myriad.
yeah.
So
Go for it.
I knew that he was moonlighting on the drums because in sound checks and stuff with Bucker Bands, he'd get behind the drums and we'd all be like, whoa, that's his instrument. And so at the time we worked together at Red Robin.
Yeah.
We were both bussers.
Yeah.
And
Amazing.
And we had the Myriad had just formed. Like it was, we were in this band. It was Whistletoe, and a couple of the guys from the Myriad were also in Whistletoe. But we had just written a song called Until We Meet Again, which actually was the first song we released as the Myriad. But it's one of those moments where I started playing the song for the guys in the practice room, and I could just see the faces of the horn players just slowly crumble because they realized that there was no spot for them on this slow, moody, broody song. And so at the end they said, what did you want us to play, like long whole notes or something? And I said, I think you guys are going to sit this one out. And then we played at the next show, we played this song Until We Meet Again, and I felt like the band really came alive. And the poor horn players, I love those guys to this day, but I think they knew it too. And then we decided, hey, we're going to start a new band. And at that point, the guy who was playing drums for us, was it Randy?
It was Randy at that time.
Okay, so Randy was our drummer, and he wasn't able to move to Seattle, which was the plan of the band at that point. So I approached Scott at Red Robin.
Mm-hmm.
And I just said, Scott.
Mid-busing table.
Yeah, we're sitting there.
Whispered in my ear.
We're just both like wiping down this 8-top.
I love that.
And Scott's hands are filled with pint glasses. And I just said, dude, do you want to like move with us to Seattle and become the drummer for this band we're starting? And like, I knew he was good, but I do remember saying like, can you make drums like your main thing? Like put everything you have into it. And you were just like, challenge accepted.
Oh yeah, I love the challenge.
Aww.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so go, here's the real story. Jeremy, I had a friend that had this kind of like metal band or whatever, and they wanted me to come play drums on one song. And it was a show. I used to promote shows a lot, and that's kind of how I got my bands in high school to play, was put a show on, then we could play, because probably no one would have us play. I did this show, and my friend's band played. They opened for like some touring bands. It was maybe like Spoken or something.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
But I played drums on one song, and Jeremy and our old bass player, John Roger, were there, and they saw me play drums, and they're like, whoa, like Scott can play. And ironically, it was a Project 86 song that I was playing. It was a cover, which I ended up playing Project 86 for
nice.
a year. From 2011 to 2013. I played drums for Project 86. So it's kind of like full circle moment. But, going back, they saw me play and they're like, oh, like he has potential. And like Jeremy said, I was kind of moonlighting on drums a lot. Like you could say I'd been playing for a couple of years, but really, it'd only be when I had access to a kit. So I actually went and bought a kit from a friend of mine, started studying, and that's like always been my approach on drums, is like studying with different teachers and being like a student of the drums, and I took it real serious. And then like he asked me do you want to play drums? And I was like, yeah, let's go. And at that point I didn't know what I was doing. We were both living in Redding and early 20s, and I was like, let's do it. And so we moved to Seattle, and that was basically the start of the band. We were roommates for a little bit until he got married, and then it was me, him, a couple other guys, some friends of ours, Jamie and Jordan, and then Schofield, John Roger Schofield, and Jamie. Yeah. together. That's kind of how the band started.
That's awesome. Well, Jeremy, tell me real quick, influences you had, records that you kind of pushed you in that direction, and then we'll go into the beginning of the band, like Scott just said.
Yeah. In high school, my favorite band was Radiohead, and I also enjoyed like Oasis a lot.
Great band.
And a lot of the European bands like Kent from Sweden.
I love Kent.
Yeah, and big fan of like, Coldplay and Keane and Muse, and also listen to a lot of like the grungier bands, Nirvana and Pearl Jam, and I was a huge fan of the Smashing Pumpkins.
Oh yeah.
That's another cool story. I'll tell it real quick. And I think it was in 2007 or 8, we were playing a show in LA, and there was this woman there that our manager at the time, she said, hey, she wants to get coffee with us afterwards. She's a manager too and really likes the band. And so we're having coffee, and the question came up like, who's your big artist? Like, who are you managing right now? And she's like, oh, I'm managing a band called the Smashing Pumpkins. And
oh my God.
And she's like, yeah. At that point, Smashing Pumpkins had taken like 10 years off. And so she said, yeah, they're coming back. And so I'm helping put together the band. It's still Jimmy Chamberlain on drums. And so they're replacing James Eha, the guitar player.
Yeah, with Jeff Schroeder. Yeah.
Yeah. And so about a week later, she came to see us at a festival, and afterwards she said, hey, we've asked a bunch of bands like Blink-182 and Panic at the Disco and all these different bands to cover a Smashing Pumpkins song for like a tribute album for their coming back or whatever. And we really want you guys, the Myriad, to do a Pumpkin song. And I was like, well, yeah, that would be amazing. Dream come true. I didn't say that. I was just like, yeah, cool. I said, we'll do it. But she said a lot of the bands are doing stuff off Siamese Dream and Pisces Iscariot and Melancholy and The Infinite Sadness, and so Billy's hoping you guys can do something off of Adore. And so we looked at the Adore album. We decided to do Perfect.
Ooh, great song.
Perfect lovers when we meet. And so she said it's due in like a week. So at the time I was in Reading, the band was in Seattle. We worked back and forth, got the song done, sent it in. She called me and she said, Billy really loves it. And in my mind, I'm thinking,
oh my God, that's incredible.
Billy just listened to our song or his song with us doing it. He loves it. And she said, go look at Smashing Pumpkins' MySpace page. So we went on, and I don't know if you remember, but back then you could have like your top
10, yeah,
10 friends or whatever. And we were the Smashing Pumpkins' #1 friend.
Are you freaking serious?
For 6 months. And Billy had them send me a bunch of CDs and T-shirts and all access passes to their first show back at the Fillmore.
Whoa!
Like a 10-year hiatus. So I went down there with my wife and we went to the show and it was amazing. But yeah, that's my little Smashing Pumpkins.
That's unbelievable.
Story.
Did that comp ever come out?
I believe so. I'm not really sure, but we did include Perfect on as a bonus track on With Arrows with Poise.
I did not hear that. I need to hear that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's up there somewhere. I think it's on Apple Music and stuff and Spotify and all that, but it's that, and then the other bonus track was Call Me by Blondie, which we did for MTV.
Great song. That's awesome, man. I love hearing that. That's amazing. Pumpkins are one of my favorite bands. That's really, really cool. Love that. So we talked about the beginning and the Myriad. You guys sounded like you moved up to Seattle to start the band. Bring me through the beginning of that time and kind of what that was like for you guys individually, and then we'll kind of go into signing with Floodgate.
Yeah, I mean, when we started, we were up just north of Seattle. We had a house in Linwood. And really it started with just me, Jeremy, and John Roger Schofield, and then John Young, who we knew from Reading. He went to Simpson College, and Jeremy knew him through bands and stuff, and I did as well. Some of our bands all played together. Asked him to join, and then Jeremy was working at a studio, Ironwood Studios. Is that right?
Yeah.
At Ironwood Studios. We actually tracked You Can't Trust the Ladder there and some of our EPs. But he was working at Ironwood Studios and then met Stephen Tracy, who also ended up working there, and they became friends. And then we asked Stephen to join as well. So it was kind of like this perfect situation where it just all came together in the beginning. And, initially we played just local to Seattle, really. Like our first show was at the Experience Music Project, the EMP, which is,
yeah. I've seen that. Yeah.
Really cool.
You gotta tell them what you did at that show.
No, I'm not telling you. But we played there, and it was like a packed house. And I don't think it was because of us. It just happened to be like a busy night.
Yeah.
But it was packed. It was amazing. So for our first show, it was like, whoa, okay, is this what it's like playing in Seattle? And then after that, I felt like, I would help promote a lot of the shows since I had experience doing that. I'd go do all the posters and work with news and stuff. And after that, it was just like typical your band, just trying to get people to come to your shows. And so some of the shows would be pretty empty. We played El Corazon, in Seattle. We played,
the Crocodile.
Yeah. I can't remember where else. There was a bunch of venues. There's, Pioneer District, there's a venue down there we played. I remember it was super narrow. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but
Sunset Tavern.
What's that?
Sunset Tavern.
Oh yeah, we played Sunset.
Yeah,
Tavern.
Sunset. So yeah, we just did what you do as an early band. You're just trying to play as many shows as possible. And then I remember we ended up doing like a tour with a couple local Seattle bands out to, it was like Montana, Eastern Washington. Once again, played some pretty rough shows. It's just kind of what you had to do. You had to
a lot of casinos in Montana. We were kind of like a casino band for a bit.
$10,000 store?
Oh yeah, there's a store in the middle of Montana that if you're driving on the main highway there, it's called the 10,000 silver dollar store. You go in and they have every weapon you can possibly imagine from the medieval days to now, like knives and swords and stuff. And then they have the biggest animal heads and with horns and stuff. What am I thinking?
Bison.
Yeah. So at one point we ended up buying one of those the horns that are on these horns. We were in a 15 passenger van. And these horns we chained on the grill of the van, and they extended out just beyond the width of the van. They were so big that our van looked like a beast at that point. And we drove that thing around, and I remember we were on the East Coast playing at a big festival, and this festival was massive. It was in, I think, Pennsylvania, and it had
Creation?
Maybe. It had 110,000 people that year.
Probably Creation.
Yeah. And we started driving the rig in, and we got stopped by security, and they told us we're going to have to remove our horns. And we almost just turned tail and got out of there. Telling us we got to remove our horns. But yeah, we did reluctantly remove the horns. We didn't want to impale any of the teenagers out there.
Sure.
But, it was, 10,000 silver dollar store.
I can't tell you, I can't remember one venue or one show in Montana, but I can remember that store.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That was my favorite part of going to Montana.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about signing with Floodgate. We talked about Tim Tabor earlier, and how did that come to? And was there any other labels interested at the time? And why did you decide on Floodgate?
Well, we did that thing that doesn't ever work. It worked this time, but I tell bands all the time not to do it because it shouldn't work, and I don't know how it worked, but it's like the thing where you put together a little press packet.
Sure. And
you send it out to different labels and stuff. So, and now that I'm older, I understand those get thrown away. Labels aren't even allowed to accept unsolicited material because they can get sued for stealing a song, giving it to one of their artists or something. So, but we did it because we were young and ambitious, and somehow it worked. There was this girl named Sarah that worked for Floodgate, and I think she was new and she didn't totally know the rules or the ropes at that point. So she got this envelope in the mail from this band from Seattle called the Myriad. So she thought, I'll take a listen to it. So she listened to this little EP that we had, and she loved it. And we knew that they were going to be attending a festival in Illinois called Cornerstone Festival like a month after that. So she actually called me and said, hey, I listened to your EP. I love it. I'm going to make sure that the president of the label attends your show at Cornerstone. So she had told Tim that we were playing and that she liked our sound and that he should go watch it. And then it just so happened that Aaron Marsh, the singer of Copeland, and Stephen Christian, the singer of Anberlin, also were aware of the band and liked the sound. And so they had mentioned to Tim too, these guys aren't signed yet. You should go check them out. I think at that point, both those bands were on like Militia Group or Tooth and Nail or something.
Yeah.
Anberlin was Tooth and Nail. Militia Group was Copeland. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were friends with Tim, and they said and he said that's crazy because my assistant said to go watch them too. So Tim came, watched the show, loved it. Afterwards, he invited us to have a lemonade with him in the promenade. You know, we were surrounded by food trucks, and Tim buys us lemonades, and we're sitting at this bench or this little picnic table, and he said, hey, I want to sign you guys to my label, Floodgate Records. And it was like that thing you do moment where all of us were like, there's a guy who just bought us lemonades. He's got his Honda Civic parked around the corner, and he wants to sign us. We're doing this. We're all doing this right now.
That's incredible. I love that. Did you guys know who Tim Tabor was before?
We knew that he was the singer of the Prayer Chain, which is a band that we all liked from the 90s. And we didn't know much about Floodgate, just the little research that we had done. But he said, hey, I love your sound. I want to help you guys out, and let's make a record. And we all were chomping at the bit, you know, and so we signed with Tim. And then shortly thereafter, we hit the road. We were on tour at that point, pretty much a good part of that was Scott's big demise because we were on the road too much.
Yeah, we did some pretty rough tours in the beginning.
Who was it with? Was it Bernard at the time, or who were you touring with?
Bernard was one of the bands we toured with, but we were on the road 200 days out of the year. Stationed in Germany with the military or something, you know, it's like going overseas. Like, so for those of us who were married, or even Scott, like you know, if you're not married and you're dating or whatever, like it was like just kind of brutal. We were just on the road.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the time. Always stuck in a van together. And if we're not stuck in a van together, we're unloading gear, and then we're stuck on a stage together, and then we're stuck in a hotel room together. Cause at that point, you know, there wasn't money to buy like, you know, 3 or 4 rooms. So we were all just pile in, and it's kind of like the grind of bands. People don't necessarily realize, but there's the grind, and then there's that kind of like break moment that happens for a very small few of the bands that grind, where when I say break, I mean, you know, maybe you get a single that pops off of the radio, or you get signed to a upstream to a bigger label, and they send you out on a big bus tour or whatever. But there's that moment where things get a little easier, but until then, it's sort of a brutal thing. You have to really love that 30 minutes to an hour every night sharing your music with a bunch of people, which is why we all do it. But the other 23 hours of the day are just kind of exhausting. And
I believe it.
He says sharing music with a bunch of people. A lot of times in the early days, it'd be sharing your music with a few people. Happen to show.
No, I get
it.
I
remember one tour in the beginning of us touring. We got signed to Floodgate, released our full length, and we would do these showcases in New York, and it would be like the lap of luxury, doing like a showcase for some major labels. One of them was Columbia Records, and we were on like the 23rd floor, and you're like playing this club that they have up on in fact, the elevator took our whole van up. It was like a industrial elevator.
It's amazing.
You pull in your 15-passenger van and trailer. We did this show there for all the A&R folks, and then they took us out for like dinner and drinks and spent all this money. You stay in a super nice hotel, and then the next day you're driving out of the city and you go play another show for like 12 people and you're not getting paid much and you're just starving. And those early days, like Jeremy said, it's kind of like where your character's built, and
Sure.
it really does. I think for a lot of people, it kind of filters out the people that don't have the grit to continue on. And I would even say, like Jeremy said, for myself, what did me in really was I was going through just some emotional stuff that I needed to deal with to be off the road. It was a relationship I was trying to sort out. I was dating someone and it didn't work out, and I did quit the band to kind of sort that out. But I would say this, it made that grind a lot harder for me. And I would say that's probably why a lot of bands end up quitting, is they don't get past the grind period to see what's on the other side, which the Myriad ended up doing, post me leaving. They grinded it out even a while longer after I left the band until there was kind of that big break and stuff. So
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the full length. Let's talk about You Can't Trust a Ladder. Obviously your first foray into, was that your first time in the studio at the time? Jeremy, I know you said you worked in production for 25 years. Was that a new thing for you and the band as a whole? And kind of maybe bring me through the recording of that record and what that was like for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I had started recording probably my senior year of high school or something, so I had been doing it forever. And then in 2000, I got a job at Ironwood Studios, which is a huge multi-room studio in Seattle. So when the band started, we actually had that as an outlet kind of in the off hours. So we'd come in to record singles and stuff.
Yeah.
So it wasn't our first time in the studio, but it was our first time recording a full-length record. I think we did, was it 10 or 12 songs?
We did three EPs in the early days of the band, which was released digitally recently, or like last year.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, Jeremy has one of them in his hand or ear. Which of you?
Oh.
That was 2003.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then Until We Meet Again was before that, and then 2004 was the Myriad EP, which was like some of the songs that ended up on You Can't Trust the Ladder. It was almost like early versions of those songs.
Yeah. So it wasn't our first time in the studio, but it was our first time making a full length, which takes a lot longer. And but yeah, I mean, it's every project that you make as a band, at least for me, there's this positive cringe of listening back or looking back, because every time you do the next thing, usually there's a maturity and you grow in a lot of different areas. And I see that with bands I work with. I'll do their first, second, third, fourth record, and every album I see them grow through the process. So You Can't Trust a Ladder, I mean, there's a lot of fun memories of it, and when I listen to it, there's a cringe because, but it's a good cringe. It's something that helped me grow at that time and helped all of us,
Yeah.
But, and I hear a lot. I mean, I just got a text last night on the way home, like at 8:00 at night, from a guy that I haven't seen in 20 years from Seattle, who I think he used to be a fan of the band or something, but he said, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me, but I just want to let you know that record, You Can't Trust a Ladder, like the amount of times I've been driving in my car listening to it and had to pull over on the side of the road because I was bawling too hard or something,
That's cool.
So I mean,
That's great, man.
I love stories like that, and it's it was a good start of everything, and I don't go near ladders to this day. I mean, I've never trusted them.
So are you guys proud of it overall? I mean, it sounds like you are. You said you have a cringe moment here and there, but I mean, this is kind of where you cut your teeth, like you said. I mean, that's got to be something I would be proud of at least.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what do you think, Scott?
Yeah, no, I'm proud of that record. I think if you listen to it, it's not probably as cohesive as with Arrows with Poise, because a lot of it was like songs that we wrote for that record, and then some of the songs that we had in the prior EPs, Which of You, and even Until We Meet Again, like the early version of Until We Meet Again is like this acoustic kind of style of song, and then what you hear is called 10,000 by 10,000, or 10,000 times 10,000. That song is Until We Meet Again, but it's updated and it changed and it got produced out. So like I'm proud of like what we released. I'm proud of what I played on the drums and just the experience of doing a full length, working with the producer. Aaron Marsh came actually to town and worked with
Oh,
us.
cool. Awesome.
So yeah, I'm super proud of that one.
It's funny too, because I think listening back to that, you can kind of hear as you listen that we were figuring out our sound.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
When Scott says it's not like totally cohesive, in those early days, I mean, almost all of my favorite bands, if I go back and listen to their super rare first album or whatever, you can hear their, them almost as you're listening, them sorting out who they are and what their sound is. And so, yeah, I mean, I love that record. It's always fun to listen back to see where we started and where we've come.
Absolutely. And then what was the Tabor like it? How did Floodgate love it?
Yeah. I mean, back then it was a big flagship for them and for us, and we ended up shooting a few music videos to it, and yeah, I mean, and it was fun to finally have like a big collection of songs, because then when we went out, we played live shows. We actually had like a full, like, you know, we could do like a headlining slot and kill it, you know. So
that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
What, so did you guys hit the road right after that? Again, kind of the same old grind. And what was the touring like for that record?
Yeah, I mean, every time you go out, I feel like we've played pretty much every state, at least not Alaska and Hawaii, but in the mainland. And every time you go out, the crowd gets a little bit bigger because friends tell their friends and stuff. And that's always a good sign. If you've been going out for 5 years and you're playing in front of 20 people a night every single time, and it's like a fresh new 20.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But we found that we'd go back out to the same cities, and maybe it would be the same venue or a different venue, but the crowds would get bigger and bigger.
That's awesome.
And that's always fun. I mean, some of the small intimate shows were super memorable because it's a different experience, but I personally gravitated towards ones where we're able to share our music with more people, and it feels like, I don't know, like, encouraging going back out and seeing more people resonate with the band and the sound and everything. But yeah, definitely when we went out and toured You Can't Trust the Ladder, it felt like it was starting to come together. And we were billed at that point with other bands. We'd go out with like 3 bands, and it would just be like 2 months on the road, just night after night with a couple bands. So you'd make like brotherhood with these other bands.
Yeah.
Which was great.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Jeremy brought up an example of like going back to a city, and one I can remember is Detroit. We'd go back there, and House of Heroes, we'd do shows with them.
Yeah.
They're awesome band. And I just remember going there the first time. I can't remember the venue. It was like near 8 Mile. But we would go there and play, and it was like, you know, not a lot of people, maybe 25. And then we'd come back again, and the shows started filling out a lot more. It was a great example of just that touring that you do to get more fans, and their friends tell their friends.
Was that the venue that had like a cemetery in the back?
I can't remember.
David Dallas?
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like right by 8 Mile.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So that's kind of what you had to do. I mean, it's like now you can put out a video on TikTok of you playing with your band in your garage, and it goes.
I know.
And then you have. But it's crazy. I mean, it's nice for those bands because they don't have to tour, and then all of a sudden they decide to tour, which I've seen some bands do this. Even friends I have, Gable Price and Friends, like those guys, I know those guys.
Oh yeah, I know Gable. Yeah.
And that was kind of their thing. Like during COVID, they released an EP and some videos, I believe, and then it just kind of blew up. And now they're touring and selling out clubs and stuff across the U.S. And that was like how they started, which is I think is really cool. It's a different grind, I think now.
Absolutely.
Having to just go out as a fresh band and no one knows who you are, and you're trying to people come out to your shows.
Absolutely, guys. Well, so you obviously are touring. When does Koch Records come in and bring me through that in the MTV Mountain Dew contest? I kind of walk me through that, and I guess why the label change? I kind of bring me through that.
Yeah. So at some point, Tim Tabor sold Floodgate, I believe. So it's all a little bit fuzzy, but I want to say he sold Floodgate and all the masters to Warner.
Oh, okay.
And Floodgate, I believe, became like sort of a division of Warner. And at that point, they were interested in upstreaming us to another label off of Floodgate. And like basically, we were interested in that too because we felt like it was time.
Sure.
Especially with Tim selling the label. So we had been talking with several labels. I think one was called Credential.
Oh yeah, that's Edison Glasses on that. Yeah.
And then Tooth and Nail. We met with Brandon Ebel and some of the guys at Tooth and Nail, and they came down to a big show we had at House of Blues in Anaheim, and all that was super fun. And this label called Koch Records came in kind of at the 11th hour. Like we actually had deals on the table from a few of the labels that we were interested in. And Koch came in, and they had a lot of artists like they had like Sinead O'Connor and Snoop Dogg, and it was
So cool.
Yeah, it was like random, and they didn't have any bands like us, and so they came in with a really high dollar amount offer, and we literally I got on the phone with the president of the label, and I turned him down. I didn't know who they were, and I was just like, I don't know, not feeling it. And then I got a call a few days later, and they were like, he really doesn't like a no for an answer from anybody. And I didn't know this, but they were like the largest independent label in the world. Like as far as like the hundreds of millions of dollars that they made annually or whatever was crazy. And so he really didn't like it. So he like upped the amount of money and then said, and that was on a Friday. And then he said he wanted to get back on the phone with me Monday and up the amount. And it's like, all right, let's do this. Because, you know, when they're putting that much skin in the game, it means they really believe in you, and it means they're going to like make a return on their money. So we figured, okay, these guys seem like the right fit. So at that time, when we signed, it just so happened that we were traveling across the U.S. to meet up with a band in Texas to go on a tour. And John Young, our guitar player, he was sort of our social media manager at the time. So he had been like signing us up for anything that was new. There was like new like MySpace, Facebook kind of things coming out every week. And so he would sign us up for whatever is the new thing. And he was signing us up for something that MTV started, and he thought it was like a new MTV social media thing because he had to upload a picture of the band and a bio and all these things. But it was really a contest it was MTV's Search for the Next Breakout Band, sponsored by Mountain Dew. And so they call it the Dew Circuit Breakout. And their plan was they got 4,000 bands that submitted. And again, we didn't even know we had submitted to enter a competition. We thought it was like MTV's social media page. So we got their whole thing was they got 4,000 submissions. They're going to call the staff, MTV staff picks their favorite 12 bands out of the 4,000. They call those bands twice. If they don't answer the first or second call, then they call the 13th, 14th, 15th band down the line. They have to answer one of the first two calls. So we're in their top 12 selection, and we got a call, and we were in the middle of the desert. Like, I want to say we were in New Mexico. We should not have had reception in 2007 in the desert in Los Alamos, wherever we were at. But we did, and John answered the phone, and they said, hey, this is MTV. You entered into a contest. And John's like, no, we didn't. And they were like, yeah, you definitely did. And he's like, oh, I thought that was a social media thing. And they said, well, you're one of 4,000, or you're one of 12 bands out of 4,000 that we've selected to be in this thing. And do you want to do it? And John's like, well, what does it entail? And they said, well, for the next 3 months, our camera crews at MTV are going to fly out and follow you on tour and make commercials and stuff of you guys. And the listeners at MTV, kind of like American Idol or something, they call in and they vote online for their favorite band. And it goes from the top 12 down, whittles down to the top 6, then it whittles down to the top 3. The top 3 fly to New York City and play at the MTV studios there, the TRL room, right up, in Times Square. And then the judges, actually, then there's judges and stuff there, but the ultimately it comes down to the voters. And so we ended up making it to the top 3. We went to New York. We played with this band, The Material and Them Terribles, and we ended up winning the whole thing. There was like confetti shooting off and all. It's all on YouTube. You can go watch it, but it was a huge moment for us because the following year, 2008, we were MTV's Breakout Band of the Year. We had several videos on MTV. One of them went to #1 for a week.
That's nuts.
The MTV Music Awards with the popcorn statues and all that.
Yeah.
Like during those commercials, it would be like our songs playing. And we were on like a bunch of different MTV shows like The Real World and 16 and Pregnant and, legendary shows. We never knew what we were going to be on, but, it was fun. And then we were on the video game Rock Band too. So.
Oh, that's so cool, dude. What was that? I mean, how did that make you guys feel? I mean, I'm sure that was, unexpected, but I mean, that had to make you feel amazing.
It was amazing. And it was, amazing in the fact that it felt like all the years of grinding we kind of like crested that in some ways. I mean, it's not like everything gets easy overnight, but we went from being in a van to doing a lot of bus tours in 2008. And, being able to have our own bed in a hotel and sharing with a dude.
Yeah.
And the crowd, playing in front of a lot of people that year, and we played a couple of sold out shows in my hometown, which was fun, the Cascade Theater, and flying to New York and shooting, live concert films with MTV at the Highline Ballroom, and then we actually filmed. They had this whole concept of they wanted to make the Myriad like this traveling band of almost like medieval brothers, but in a modern world. So we're in that famous part of New York with that building that's got the really tight angle on it.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
We were in the middle of that. Like there's a little island in the middle of that like 6-way stop in New York or whatever. And we're in a tent and we all have like spears and bow and arrows and stuff. And like we all emerged from this tent and they filmed all these commercials with us in New York, like dressed like medieval.
That is bonkers.
So it was really fun and just a super exciting year, and felt like, a lot of the hard work that we put in finally was like, okay, now we're able to do this with a little bit.
Paying off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, obviously you sign, get upstreamed, and then that happens. You start working on the new record. Obviously you've got some excitement, and bring me through the next record with Arrows with Poise. I mean, you found your sound, it sounds like, at this point. Kind of talk me through that record and kind of the excitement of recording that record and thoughts on that.
Yeah, so we started recording with Arrows with Poise in 2007 with a producer named Tim Paddlin in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And he had worked with some bands that we really liked. Love Drug is one of the bands.
Oh, yeah.
And we toured with Love Drug for, I want to say it was like 2.5 months.
Wow.
It was like Love Drug, The Myriad, and Branston, and we toured all across the States for a super long time. I think we started in like September, and it might have been a month. There might have been a couple tours. We toured with another band called Isley.
Oh yeah, great band.
Videra and the Envy Corps.
Yeah.
All of those were like the fall of 2007. But we sometime in between tours, we spent several weeks with Tim. We got some great initial tracks. We ended up having to finish the record back in Seattle. But yeah, that record came out in, I want to say, the spring of 2008. So that was released on Koch Records during like our MTV year, which is perfect timing for all those songs.
Yeah. Well, what was the recording like? Was it good for you? I mean, were all the songs written? Did you write anything in the studio? And kind of maybe your thoughts on it looking back on it.
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of ideas, and we weren't sure exactly what necessarily to bring when we worked with Tim Padalin. I think Tim was one of those producers that he expects the band to come in like really well prepared and blow them away with songs, and then he would record and add to it and change with the band like on the floor. We were kind of like in this mode of like we had some ideas, but we hadn't really fleshed them out fully. So I feel like our time with Tim in the studio was a lot of figuring out what we wanted to, like how to arrange these songs. So I want to say maybe we got like half of the record done with Tim, and not as much as we had hoped. But again, I feel like we were pretty underprepared looking back. But the experience is really good. It's always fun working with a different producer and kind of getting in their head a little bit as they get into yours, trying to figure out like, what they're hearing and exposing some of the things of the band that need to be worked on and dynamics and stuff. And so, I mean, it was a good experience. I'm really proud of that record. It was, I feel like it was our first like real time to know our sound as a band and put together a bunch of songs that like actually feels like, okay, this is who the Myriad is.
Yeah.
Everything up to there was a real growing experience, and then this was the first time I feel like really captured it.
Sure. Well, when the record comes out, obviously you've got the MTV thing as well. Are the shows, like you mentioned, kind of some of the bigger shows? Is that what you're alluding to? Were the tours pretty big after this record?
Some of them, yeah. I mean, when we were on tour with Isley, I mean, I feel like we were playing in front of, they were clubs, but they were always packed out. 500 to 1,000 people a night, which is really cool. And then we went on tour with Switchfoot.
Oh my gosh.
Which was massive. They really inspired us. They had been on the road for quite a while, longer than we had band. And I remember we played a show with them in Texas in an arena, and there was like 6,000 people at it.
Wow.
And amazing show. And the very next night we played in the parking lot of, on a semi-truck, like half bed, and there was probably 500 to 1,000 people there. But I remember, I'll never forget this, the Myriad, we play this show, and we should just be grateful for any opportunity we get, but we're a bunch of punks and we're learning how to manage expectations and whatever. But we play this show in front of 6,000 people, and we're like, yeah, this rules. And then we're in this parking lot and it's hot, and we're just kind of like, the show's beat, right? And we just didn't have great attitudes. But then we watched Switchfoot put on just as good, if not a better show for these 500 in this parking lot than they did the night before. And watching them walk off stage behind the semi-truck when no one could see them but us, giving each other hugs and high fives after the show. And we all of us at the band were like, wow, we had to have a band meeting after that. It was just like, guys, we're forgetting what we're doing this for. It's not about crowd size or whatever. It's about, the connection with people. And we get that. So it was a really, really humbling experience, but it helped us grow big time.
Absolutely. I love hearing that. I mean, I definitely could see, being on the road and grinding for years and you just being like, expecting something in your mind or just feeling, oh, should be this way, but it's like, it's easy to lose track of that. And yeah, Switchfoot's a great example of a band that's just one of those bands that just, they're good for a reason. And it's cool to have noticed that and seen that, because it is easy to forget that stuff. So, yeah, man, I love that. That's cool. I've been humbled as well. I totally understand, being in that aspect. Well, let's talk about so you're obviously the touring and whatnot. What the end of the band kind of, or not the end of the band, taking a break of the band. Kind of bring me through that and just kind of what that was like and looking back on it, how you feel about it now.
Yeah. So in the fall of 2008, we were at the MTV studios, in New York and filming an interview actually. And it was all 5 band members were kind of like staggered on these like steps, and they were filming us and asking us questions, and we were all standing up. And I remember Randy, our drummer at the time, he basically, when Scott left the band, Randy was at the final show that Scott played, and Scott like announced on stage that he was leaving the band, and Randy came up to us afterwards and said, basically like, I'm ready to jump in if you guys will have me. And so Randy had been our drummer from that point through this, and he collapsed during the interview at MTV Studios. He fell down and sort of landed on me, and I fell forward off the stairs, and we thought maybe from the lights, where you kind of get exhausted standing, like knees locked or whatever, like maybe he fainted. But then once he came to, he told us that he had been having this really like sharp pain in his upper left chest area that had been getting worse on tour. But he's kind of a machine. He comes from concrete construction, so he's like this head to toe, just like ripped human being that would never complain about pain. But it got so bad during the interview, he actually fainted, and we all said, "Where is it?" He said, "Right here." And there's kind of like almost looked like a golf ball sized lump.
Wow.
Skin on his upper left chest. And so we were on tour at that point for a few months. When we got home, I think it was like around May or June, he got it checked out. They thought it was swollen lymph nodes, and so they booked him for like an outpatient surgery in August of 2008. And during the surgery, his wife called me. She said, "Randy's still under," but the doctors came out and they said that it's not a swollen lymph node. It's a huge black cancerous tumor. And they wanted to know if they have permission from her to remove his arm. And she's like, "I wanted to call you." She's crying. Now I'm crying. "I wanted to call you and ask you because Randy's not awake yet. And when he wakes up, he'd wake up with no arm and part of his chest gone. And he's the drummer of your band." And I was like, "Kristen, I can't make this decision for you. And I don't know what to say except I'll do anything you need me to do. I can't make that decision for Randy." And she ended up saying, "Just take the tumor out and sew him back up," which they did. We found out he had a really rare form of bone cancer called chondrosarcoma. And he ended up going into like a really aggressive like chemo treatment right away. I think it was December of 2008. And at that point, we were like a well-oiled machine that was touring a ton. So we had tours lined up. We had our manager, attorney, label, everybody calling saying, who's filling in for Randy. And the band and I just felt like at that point we would have no regrets when we're old and dying.
Yeah.
It's like a Braveheart statement. 20 years from now, we'll look back and have no regrets about putting down our instruments and being with Randy during this time. But we certainly would have regrets looking back in our life saying, "Hey, we got to fill in. We wish you the best. We're out of here."
Yeah, absolutely.
And he wanted us to keep going. He said, "Dude, you guys got to keep going." And I said, "Not right now. We're with you right now.
Wow.
Let's get you healed, fixed, and then we'll get back out there. So he fought really hard. He got a clean bill of health about a year into chemo, and then, post-op or post-scans like a month later, they're like, it's back, it's more aggressive than ever, so it was sort of downhill from there. Passed away, I believe it was November 5th of 2010.
Wow.
And at that point, it kind of took the wind out of my sails for writing and playing out. Like he was, anytime you're with this band of brothers and one of them falls off like that, it's like,
yeah,
you work so hard, and it just the ambition to keep going was not there for me, and I think for the other guys too. So at that point, we were all living in different cities. Randy and I were the only two that were in Reading. But I just told the guys, like, at that point, John Roger Schofield, the bass player, and John Young had both quit the band previously. And so the band was like me, Steven, and Randy, and then Randy passed away. And at that point, it was just me and Steven kind of like, let's just put things on pause right now. And that ended up turning into about 10 years.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, totally understand that. I mean, that had to be really hard, and going through that, I can't imagine kind of what that felt like. But I mean, I feel like you obviously did the right thing, and you obviously all kind of had your own careers, after that. So things happen for a reason. Man, that's so tough. I remember hearing about his death, and that was really devastating to hear, from the outside looking in. And I just, thanks for being transparent with that. That was, that's hard to hear sometimes, even from my perspective. So
I would love to chime in on this.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, no, so when I wanted to just talk about this with Randy because he's awesome guy. When I was joining the band, I didn't have a kit of my own in the very beginning, like when we were still in Reading. And Randy graciously said, hey, my drum kit is at this practice space for Jeremy's old band, Whistletoe, what you mentioned earlier in the podcast. And Randy would let me go just bang on his drums and practice until I got my own kit. So that was like, I'd already known Randy. I always was like, this guy's an awesome drummer, really like looked up to his playing. And then he was just letting me use his kit, use his cymbals, which is now as a drummer, letting another drummer use your cymbals, like a little wacky because they can crack them. And I was not good or didn't have great technique at that point. And so I always thought that was really cool. But fast forward, I was in the band and we were touring. And like I said, I was going through some personal stuff. Excuse me. Needed to get off the road. And then when Randy took over, I was like, oh, it's the perfect person to come in and play drums in the band. I ended up actually filling in for him, maybe one or two tours later on, that he couldn't make because he's, like Jeremy said, he's a construction contractor, would have to stay home to actually work his business and stuff. And so I jumped in on some of those tours. And, but what I was going to say was, I thought was a really cool thing is, for Randy, he sacrificed not moving up to Seattle with the band to be a family man. He had kids, he had a wife, he had a business. And he kind of, in a sense, like put down the drumsticks and kind of gave up on that dream. And so when I left the band and he joined, in some ways it was, I don't know, kind of a godsend, I think, to see him be able to live out his dream that he didn't get to because he had kind of laid down his drums to be like, okay, I'm going to sacrifice for my family. I'm going to work my business. I'm going to be a family man. And I just thought that was such a noble thing. And then also to see, I think in some ways God opened the door for Randy to come back into the band and then actually get to live out his dream before he went away. Obviously when you leave a band and what I went through leaving the band was like a real, almost in some way like an identity crisis.
Sure.
Like I'd be known as the drummer for the Myriad. And I think for me that was a real struggle. But at the end of the day, I was like, this was a good experience for me. I met my wife, who I've now been with we've been married for 16 years, 2 kids. But then also on the flip side, like seeing Randy get to jump in and live out his dream. His kids were to an age where it was easier for him to tour. Like when kids are really little, it's very hard to tour.
Sure.
They don't quite understand. And so his kids were older. They would understand like he's going to be out on the road. And I just was like, I was really grateful to be like, I'm glad that I left so Randy could live this out. And especially with him ended up, passing away. I'm glad he got to experience that. And
That's so cool.
without the dream he sacrificed, early on in the bands.
I love hearing that. Your perspective. It's really cool that. Yeah, that's really beautiful, honestly, and it is cool how like he got that opportunity, and that he obviously impacted you guys' lives in so many ways. It's just, man, what a awesome. It's cool to hear you guys' perspective on that. That's cool, and I know it's tough, and it's, man, I can't imagine being in your shoes, but at the same time, I think that's cool that you have these beautiful memories with him that you'll never forget. So. Well, let's talk about the reunion. What brought this on, and the new songs that you've been putting out, which are fantastic, by the way. Bring me through, the reunion and what the future holds.
So Scott moved back to Redding. He had been in Sacramento for a while. He moved back to Redding a few years ago, and he actually moved, just happened to buy a house, right down the street from mine. So we started hanging out again, and at some point, Scott invited me to a Muse concert in Sacramento.
Ooh.
And we went down there. We brought our daughters.
It was awesome.
And it was the most epic show I've ever seen.
I bet.
I've seen Muse probably 5 times. I saw them play in front of 400 people in Seattle for the Absolution tour.
That's nuts.
And I just remember that show so clearly because it was this small venue with a wood floor, and I think they had a basement because the crowd, the 400 people were jumping. It was like one of those bridges where you see it starts to sway and then it breaks apart. The jumping from the crowd during sing for absolution.
Yeah.
And the floor's bending and you're it feels like you're on a trampoline, but you're looking down at these huge wood planks and you're we're going to be on the news. 400 people die at the Muse concert, but it was the most epic thing. Now, Scott and I went to, 15, 20 years later or whatever, was they had fireballs that were being triggered by the kick drum. They had a robot that was bigger than the stage, the arms of the robot expanded out over the crowd, and Matt Bellamy's shredding solos on the shoulder of this giant robot shooting lasers out of his guitars. I just remember my daughter, at the time she was 12 and she looks at me and says, "Dad, is this what every rock show's like?"
Oh my God.
Sweetie, there is no rock show on the planet quite like this. And on the way home, Scott said, "Man, that was epic." And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "You ever miss it?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, all the time." And, I don't miss the grind, but being able to make music and share it with people and all that. And Scott's like, "We should write some songs. We should, release some music. It's time, and I was like, "Whoa, let's do it, bro. Let's do it." That was kind of how it all kind of revved back up. So at that point, we just kind of got to work. So
yeah, well, talk me through some of these singles that you guys have put out, and what's the current one that you just put out a week or so ago? Was it Time? Yeah, Time.
Yeah, last Friday we released a song called Time. At this point, that's our 4th single. So the first one we did was Signs, and then We Are, and then Insomniatic, and then Signs, and then I've got a couple more in the pipe that we're working on.
Some good ones.
So is this going to be a full length, or what's the plans here?
We kind of go back and forth about it because there's something fun about writing a song and just putting it out, and you can do that now. I mean, back in the day, if you wanted to do that, it'd be let's print a CD for one song, and it didn't make a whole lot of sense. But now with the way that music is consumed and shared, so at the beginning we were let's put out some singles and then work on a full length. And then every time I write another song, and bring it to completion with the boys, it's dang it, let's put this out. So the last conversation that Scott and I had is, why not just keep releasing singles, and at some point maybe we package it into an album, but that's not necessarily like the goal. I don't feel like holding back songs in order to wait for there to be 10 or 12 of them makes as much sense as just releasing them as we get them written. So we're trying to release like a song every month or two at this point.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's the industry's changed so much where it's just kind of a singles economy. Like people will release a song every 6 to 8 weeks, and they kind of build momentum that way. Spotify playlists, all these different things that people are using now are more powerful than record labels and obviously like social media. So I think also that's initially when we started, like Jeremy said, we'd like write a song and be like, okay, is this going to be a single? Okay, let's release it. And then we're like, okay, we're going to do a full length. But then the more and more we continue to work and the more there's like momentum being built, and people typically, even with a full length, will just grab a couple songs from that full length, add it to their playlist, and that's what they're listening to.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
I mean, and so it just, in some ways, it's made more sense just to release singles. And also, I think for our schedules, like you said, like early on, like family, just everyone's schedules, it works better to release a song and then, okay, let's work on the next one. And because we're working our day jobs and, releasing other people's material. And so it just has worked really well to release singles. And I feel like in some ways it's like, well, we give people the choice of grabbing the songs they want to add to their playlists, and rather than just releasing a bunch of songs and maybe only a few of them, people grab for their playlist. Even like I see some of the stats and stuff on Spotify, like with Arrows with Poise, like there's some songs that are still the top songs, like A Clean Shot and 1,000 Melting. And I see these are the ones that are being added to people's playlists the most. Or Stuck in a Glass Elevator, which was on a soundtrack for Haven, for instance, which, mind you, that was the only song With Arrows that I tracked drums on.
Wow.
Randy was on vacation. And so Jeremy's like, hey, can you track drums on this song? So I came in and tracked drums on, I tracked drums on the early demo of, 1,000 Winters Melting. It's not the one that ended up on the record.
Oh, okay.
That one did drums.
Funny, I forgot all that.
Yeah, it's fine because I see that Haven, picked up, picked up, Stuck in a Glass Elevator. So I'm always like, oh, that's cool. Like, that's the one I got to play on.
That's so cool. I love that.
Haven is a TV show, or was a TV show. It might not.
I've heard of it. I've never watched it.
Yeah, so that song's on that. So, like, going back to the point I was making about singles, is a lot of people are just listening to singles and they'll grab a few songs from the full length.
No, that makes complete sense.
Not doing a full length anymore if people are just grabbing a few songs. And I guess it's also kind of that slow drip that keeps people coming back to your...
Absolutely. Totally get it.
It's
kind of funny because things are so different, the way music's consumed, and the hype of it all is not quite what it used to be when there was albums coming out.
Yeah.
And so it feels, the experience is a little different from our perspective, from these writers' perspective who lived in the era of the album and is now releasing singles. And so even like last Friday, the song Time came out, and I told my wife, I have a single that dropped today. And she's like, really? Which one? And Time. And she said, it's so weird because back in the day when there was, when you guys were releasing an album, it would be like a 6-month like build up and it was everything. And we did a big album release party, and then you guys were out touring and all that. And now you're like, I got a single that dropped today, sweetie. It just doesn't feel the same as like the big album drop. And
totally.
That's it is just what it is, right?
Yeah.
But it feels different, but it also feels fun to just be able to write a song and put it out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Are you guys have any plans to play any shows at all? I know you guys are kind of spread out, but is that something that would be an option?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about it. I think it just, the opportunity has to be right. We don't want to like book some clubs and go out and play, but if we were, invited on a tour or something, we're getting a good strong I feel like our live show would be really great right now. I mean, the songs that we're putting out, I feel like I'm the most connected to these than I've been ever with the music that I've written. And I think a lot of that comes with just getting older and like making sure that I'm saying what I want to say. And not, but I think back in the day, you're trying to write an album. So sometimes what the song's about doesn't matter quite as much. And you almost write, you're trying to get it done quick. And I'm not saying all those songs were tossers or whatever. I mean, I like those songs. But now I just feel like I'm more intentional about the lyrics and the melodies and the band and everything is in the same vein. We're all just, if we're going to put it out, we want it to be something special. And so I think the live show would reflect that. It would be really amazing if the right opportunity came to go out and play again, for sure. So,
yeah, man. It's exciting. I would love to see, I never got to see you guys actually, surprisingly.
Oh, ask Jared. Ask him what he.
Yeah, he told me he always raved about it. I definitely would have loved to see you guys at some point, and hopefully maybe in the future I can. Who knows?
Yeah, heck yeah.
Yeah, we feel like in some ways there's kind of a natural progression to everything. It's like, let's just continue to release music. And there was opportunities even last year to do some live stuff, and it just didn't work out. And I think, like I see momentum, and progression, but in some ways it's almost like, the band was on hiatus for so long, it's almost like starting over again.
Yeah, you're right.
Fans that were around listening to the band in the 2000s maybe have aged out or are not aware the band's back making music. I mean, I see comments like that all the time from people going, I didn't know you guys were back, and I'm so glad, and, really positive stuff. But some of those people now have had kids that are maybe like picking up the music or could be new fans. And
absolutely.
I think it's like a thing of momentum, and like Jeremy said, not just going and playing any show. Like, we want it to be right and to be something that's going to be awesome and epic and not a step backwards. I think that's the biggest thing.
Totally.
If we're going to play live, let's do it right, and it's got to be right. Whether that's a festival or a tour or whatever that is, let's do it right, and we'll continue to look into opportunities that come our way and see what's the right fit.
Heck yeah, man! I love that. Well, let me ask you this, guys. I know you can't predict the future, but, individually, what does the future look like for you personally?
As a band or just like individually?
Well, go ahead and do it as a band, but I want to know individually.
Yeah, I mean, right now I see myself continuing to write. I mean, I've got the itch again, and so I'm going to keep doing that. I'm really thankful with the career I have to be able to make music, whether it's with the Myriad or producing other artists. So, and I'm starting to dabble in film. I'm producing like documentaries now.
That's so cool.
So I'm going to continue to do that. I'm just finished a documentary. Working on distribution for that right now, but I'm going to continue to do that. Raising my kids, they're one of them's in high school, one of them will be in high school next year, and yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess for me individually, same thing. Raising my children. I have a daughter who's 8 and a son who's 12, so continuing to obviously raise them and be their dad. Still like on the side or like my main job doing design, continuing that career. I'm also working on some other small like startup projects. Yeah. It's nice to kind of have the two, balancing my life between music and design. And actually the Myriad is even how I got into becoming a designer, because I used to do our posters for our shows in Seattle.
That's so cool.
And then I got really into it. And actually after I left the band, I was kind of in between music, and so I took a break and went to design school, and that became my main job. And then I was still touring stuff, like I said, Project 86, and Jesus Culture, and Tim Walker Smith, and now the Myriad again. So definitely like moving forward, continue to drum and play. I'll be out with Kim next year again
Cool.
for some of her tours and things like that. And then I would say for the band, I think going back to what we were saying about playing live, I think everything's kind of a progression. There's been more and more interest in our music again, and more people, radio or playlists picking up the song. And so I think if I were to say what the goal would be or what I could see happening is definitely I think we'll play live again. I don't know when. I don't know what that's going to look like. Jeremy and I have discussed this, in some ways ad nauseum, just what we want it to look like. And I think at the end of the day, we've landed it at, let's just see what happens. Like there's no pressure. I think like when you're a band in your 20s and you're starting to grind, there feels like a lot of pressure. You have to make it your job. So you're super poor in the beginning and you're grinding it out, but your goal is like, okay, we need to make it. I think when you reach our age and the band's been around for a while, it's almost like, well, let's just see what happens. Like there's no pressure. If we don't play live, fine. If we do, that's even better and awesome. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Jared?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see us next year on a tour or something.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be fun to share these songs in the live experience. It's always an amazing thing to be able to present songs and have a crowd there to share that music with you live, so I would like to see that. That would be fun.
Yeah. That would be really fun.
Awesome, guys. Well, man, I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. It's been awesome. I love the new music. I'm glad you guys are back at it. It's really cool to that you guys have this creative outlet. Hey, thank you to the listener for tuning in again and again. It's been wild. So thank you so much for that. Add me on Instagram and Facebook if you'd like, at The Rumors Are True Cast. Like and subscribe if you'd like, and leave a review if you'd like as well. Thank you to Scott Davis and Jeremy Edwardson. Amazing conversation. So honored to have you guys on. Love the band, always have, always will. So thank you again for your time, guys. Got some incredible artists, guys, on the horizon, and you know it, nostalgia is still a heck of a drug. The podcast is produced by Wesley Hill, artwork by Jared Chase Bowser, and music by Brian Jaron. This episode is dedicated to the memory of my dear friend, producer, and man of many talents, Brian Jaron.